You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 53 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. I am Walt White, and we are missing an episode. Last week, I wasn't able to produce an episode, get one recorded. Actually, I was. However, one half of the episode is kind of trashed, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But a couple of weeks ago, my wife got some bad news. Her aunt had passed away. It was the weekend before last, and her side of the family is pretty close, so they were kind of shaken up about it. And when she passed away over the weekend, I was really tied up. The funeral was Wednesday of this week, and it really sort of shook up my schedule. I wasn't really interested in recording anything else. I was too busy taking care of family stuff. So the podcast sort of fell by the wayside, and that's why we are missing an episode. Well, the funeral was on Wednesday, and I took the day off from work. My wife took the day off of work. We went to the funeral. I left the wake early so that I could go to a dentist appointment, which I had scheduled like a month ahead of time or something like that. It was really difficult to get in there in this little time slot that I had, so I didn't want to give it up. So I go over to the dentist to have an old filling fixed. I had a piece break out, and I'm sitting there. The dentist fixes the filling, and he says, I had another appointment canceled. Do you want me to take care of this small filling on the bottom side, and we'll be done with this all together? So I wasn't going anywhere. I told him, yeah, go ahead, fix it. So he already had me numb at the top to fix the filling, and then he numbed me up at the bottom to put in this other small filling. And he said, this is going to be kind of weird. Your whole half of your face is going to be numb. We normally don't do top and bottom, but we're going to do it since we both have time. So I get the filling done, and when I come home from work, my wife is still with family. She picked our daughter up from daycare and then went back down to spend some more time with family. She has some family from New York that were down, and so everyone was together. They were spending time together. It was it was good for them. And I was getting kind of bored. I didn't want to drive all the way down there, hang out for a half an hour and then drive all the way back. So I'm pacing around my house. I'm not quite sure what to do, and I'm bored out of my mind. So I'm pacing around. Half my face is numb. I'm agonizingly bored. Finally, I decide I'm going to go to Cabela's, and I'm going to pick up an IDPA vest. I need one anyway, and now's as good a time as any. So I grab my little flip cam. I set it up in my car. Basically, I just Velcro it to the passenger side visor, point it at the driver's side, and go. So I'm driving down the road recording the podcast, and everything is going as best as it could. I'm still pretty numb at this point. I'm talking kind of funny, so I wound up re-recording the first segment like 3 or 4 times or something like that before I was finally happy with it, or happy enough with it. So I get about half the podcast done, and I have arrived at Cabela's. It's getting kind of late, but there's still plenty of sunlight. I go inside the store. I'm in there maybe a half an hour before I come out with my brand new shiny IDPA vest. Not actually shiny, but you kind of get the idea. And then I get back in the car and I start recording on my way home. Well, I'm kind of aware of the fading sunlight, and I'm not quite sure how well it's going to turn out, but I'm sort of pressing on anyway. The first segment that I recorded on the way home wasn't too bad. You could still see me. You could see outside the car. It was getting a little grainy because the light was fading, but it was it was workable. I turned the camera off. A couple of minutes later, I turned the camera back on to record the next piece, and at this point, it's really bad. You can barely make me out in the driver's seat, and all you can really see is outside the driver's side window. You can see things going by, cars, headlights, things like that. There's still natural sunlight out, so you can easily see outside the car, but seeing me talk is kind of difficult. I turned the camera off. A couple of minutes later, I turned it back on again to record the last piece. You can't see anything. But you can barely see things outside the car. Things are lighting up as headlights hit them, and that's about the end, about all there is to it. There's just very little to see in that last clip. So with with the show getting worse and worse from the halfway point on, I just decided to bag it, and maybe it'll turn into like a long lost episode, or it will become something at some point as a filler. I don't know, but that's kind of getting you caught up to speed on what's been going on with me. And my last week's podcast was recorded but never put out. If you've been a listener to the show for a little while now, you know what's coming. It is the reminder for the contest that's running on my blog for a signed copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting and Competition. Things have been a little stressful as of late. I was away on vacation this weekend, so I haven't finished up the contest for August yet. I still need to select a winner and announce it, and then put together a contest for September. So we're kind of in limbo here. Last month's contest is over, and I'm not quite sure what to tell you for this month's contest because I haven't put it together yet. So if you're interested in winning a signed copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting and Competition, head over to waltnpa.com. At the top of the page, there is an image slider. For the first image you're going to see is a group of guys standing around at a USPSA match. After a few seconds, that image will slide out of the way, and another will come in, and you'll see a picture of Julie Golub's book, Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting a Competition. Click on that image, and a contest page will load. It will be the latest contest with all of the details on how to get entered and things like that. At this point, all I can tell you is go there, click on that image, and if I have put together the September contest, at that point in time, you will see all the details. If not, you will see the details for August. You can look over the entries. I think there were 10 or 11 of them. I really would have liked to have seen more. However, they were good quality entries, so I really can't complain about having only 10 or 11. I had one entry come in very last minute. I think there was about an hour left before the contest closed, and it came in via email. I was out of town, so I couldn't post it. So once I get that one included, I think there'll be 11. But if you're interested in winning a copy, here's your chance to do it. First up in the news this week is an article I came across through Miguel from Gun Free Zone. He was posting about this, and after he put his post together, I clicked through to read the news article that his post was based on. And this comes from CBS 9 WAFB, and it is entitled Bystander Fired Deadly Shot, Not Officer. It was published on, I don't know when it was published because I don't see a published date. But it goes on to say, there were two big developments Monday in a case of a motorist who was shot and killed along Greenwell Springs Road Friday after a fight with a police officer. Investigators say an autopsy shows the deadly bullet was fired by a bystander, not the officer. Police also announced that no charges would be filed in the case, either against the police officer involved or the bystander who fired the fatal shot into the head of George Temple. East Baton Rouge Sheriff spokesman George Ferris says Officer Brian Harrison was escorting a funeral procession Friday when he pulled Temple over and wrote him a ticket for breaking into the procession. According to Ferris, that's when Temple attacked Harrison. Police say Perry Stevens was walking outside of the AutoZone on Greenwell Springs Road when he heard Harrison yelling for help. Harrison was reportedly on his back with Temple on top of him. That's when Stevens went to his car and grabbed his .45 caliber pistol. According to Greg Ferris, Mr. Stevens orders Mr. Temple to stop and get off the officer. The verbal commands are ignored, and Mr. Stevens fires 4 shots, all of which struck Mr. Temple. Perry Stevens fired 4 shots into Temple's torso. Officer Harrison had already fired 1 shot into Temple's abdomen. With Temple still struggling with the officer, Perry continued to advance toward the scuffle. He again orders Mr. Temple to stop what he's doing and get off the officer. Those commands are ignored, and he fires a 5th shot, and that hits his head. The incident is over with, and as you know, Mr. Temple is dead. Police are calling the shooting death justified. Perry Stevens has a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Ferris would not give out any more details relating to the shooting. Both Ferris and Baton Rouge Police Chief Jeff LaDuff stopped short of crediting Stevens with saving the officer's life. LaDuff says the entire incident is unfortunate. I spoke with his father at the scene briefly, said LaDuff. I think this is a tragic situation all around. 9 News is told George Temple has a criminal record, and Officer Harrison was involved in a shooting while employed as a prison guard in East Baton Rouge Parish, where he was suspended for 3 days back in 1995. So there were a couple of things in this news article that I found kind of interesting. The first was that autopsy reports were released that the innocent bystander's bullet was the one that fatally wounded the individual, or that killed the individual. And there were no mentions of any toxicology reports. This guy was shot 6 times in all, once by the officer, 4 times by Stevens in the abdomen. So he's got 5 shots in his torso, and it's not until he gets shot in the head that he dies. 6 rounds in all. I'd be curious to see if there was anything in his system that would allow him to take 5 shots to the abdomen and continue attacking, or if he was just one of those individuals that is that determined. I've heard reports of both, where someone high on something can just take an incredible trauma and just keep the fight going, drive forward. And then you have other instances where individuals have virtually nothing in them in terms of drugs or alcohol, and they press on and keep on fighting. It's all in how much and how determined they are to keep attacking. And I'd be kind of interested to find out how this situation plays out. Was the guy clean and sober? Was the guy high on something? What was involved there that he took 6 shots, especially with a .45? I mean, shouldn't he have disintegrated? I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's, I'd be interested in seeing how that part of the story plays out. I'm not quite sure why the news felt it necessary to talk about an incident where the officer was suspended, unless there is the potential of foul play here. I'm not quite sure. I didn't really get that vibe while reading the story, but if something is going on in the background, I guess it's pertinent information. But it's leading off the article with no one is planning on, no one is going to be charged, kind of squashes that, I thought. The other part of the story, which I thought was kind of strange, was both the police chief and the captain stopped short of crediting Stevens with saving the life of the officer. I thought that was really strange, considering that he saved the life of the officer, and the officer was only able to get 1 shot off on the attacker. He continued fighting. He took 4 more rounds to the abdomen from an innocent bystander, or from a good Samaritan, and he was still attacking. I think it's well within reason to say that had the bystander not been there, Harrison very well could have killed the officer. And it sounded like he was well on his way to doing that. I don't know what was going on, but whatever it was, the attacker had the upper hand. He was on top of the officer, and it sounds like he was winning until the Good Samaritan came in. So I'm not real crazy about that whole development. Give the guy praise for getting involved and saving the life of the officer. I don't know whether there's some politics involved there or what the case may be, but that part kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm glad that the guy got involved. I'm glad that he was able to help. I'm glad there are going to be no charges filed against him. All of that is good, but just the way that the news sort of viewed it and pointed out that no one is going to give them credit for helping was just kind of strange, or give him credit for saving the officer's life. But at any rate, there's your first news article, and I don't want to ramble on too much because I'm going to be doing a lot of talking for the next piece. For the second piece of news this episode, I don't have an actual news article to read to you. I want to kind of walk through this, how I learned about it. So a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about 2, I was planning on talking about this for last week's podcast. I was at home working. I was working from home on a Tuesday and taking care of my daughter at the same time. A couple of days a week, I work from home so that I can get some stuff done for work and watch my daughter. And then when my wife comes home, I grab my laptop and then I go finish out the day during the evening. So it's the afternoon. I'm doing a little work on my computer. My daughter's playing off to the side, and I get a tweet from a friend of mine, Corey, who's commented on the blog a number of times, regular listener to the podcast, and he also lives in the area. So I get a tweet from him asking me if I'm staying out of trouble, what's going on, am I all right, that kind of thing. And, I thought it was a really odd question considering he was in work. He knows that I'm working. So the whole thing caught me kind of off guard. And I responded pretty much the only way I knew how, kind of confused, and just telling him, well, I can't get into much trouble watching a 2-year-old, chasing a 2-year-old around the house. And I kind of left it at that. And then a couple of minutes later, I got another tweet from him saying that I guess you haven't heard about the shooting that happened in your area. And by in my area, I mean within walking distance. It's really not far at all. So I pull up the local news station just as he's tweeting me a link to the local news station, and I start reading up on what's going on. The news is really vague. It's breaking news: 2 shot, 1 dead, victim shooter apprehended, and that's kind of the end of it. So I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm jumping around between the local television station and the local newspaper, trying to put together a story because they're both giving out little snippets of information as they acquire it. And eventually I learned that there were 2 people shot. And the really concerning part of this was that one person was shot and killed right in front of their house or behind their house. It was on their porch. I don't know whether it was front porch, back porch kind of a thing. But one victim was dead, and the other was found a couple of blocks away, and they're calling him critically injured. So at this point in time, I don't know whether there's a deranged lunatic walking around the neighborhood shooting people, or if these victims were selected ahead of time. So I'm kind of worried. I've got a 2-year-old running around the house. I've got 2 people. I've got one person dead, another injured, just a couple blocks from my house, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit. And another thing that was kind of freaking me out a bit was that this happened right near a trail that I'll go on a walk with my daughter every now and again. And she was really fussy throughout the day. So I was considering taking her out for a walk to kind of tire her out. And then, we'd come back. She'd go down for a nap. I'd be able to get some stuff done for work. And had we gone out for a walk, we probably would have hit that trail and headed down towards where the shooting was. Fortunately, had we gone out for a walk, we didn't wind up going. She got tired. We laid her down, or I laid her down early. It would have been a couple of hours before the shooting, so I wouldn't have been in the area where the shooting occurred at the same time. But, it still kind of freaked me out nonetheless because I was planning on going in that direction at some point during the day. And, the news is coming out. It's slow. We find out that the shooter has been apprehended, so now at least if there was a lunatic on the streets, now he's apprehended. Now there is no more lunatic walking around killing people. It's not until later on that evening that the news is released that the person that is dead it was premeditated. The guy had selected the victim, and the other guy was just a good Samaritan, victim of circumstance, wrong place at the wrong time kind of a thing. And as it turns out, there was a neighborhood feud going on for years between these 2 individuals over a dog. The victim's dog apparently was getting out of his yard and getting into this other neighbor's yard, and it's been annoying the other neighbor for a long time. And I guess over time he just had enough of it, and he decided to go kill the dog's owner. So he walks up on the guy's porch. Excuse me. He shoots him once. The victim falls, and then there are reports that he was standing over him and he shot the guy a second time from, standing over top of him. And then he left the scene. Well, there was a roofer in the area who was doing some work, and I guess he spotted the guy's dog running loose and decided to go get the dog and bring it back. I don't know whether he knew the dog and knew the dog's owner, or if he just was a good Samaritan, grabbed the dog, checked his collar, and then took him home, kind of a thing. But whatever transpired, the second victim and the shooter crossed paths as the guy was bringing the dog back, and the shooter shot the second victim in the arm. I don't know whether he deliberately tried to wound him, if he was aiming for the dog. I don't know whether it was a little lap dog or what the case was. But the guy gets shot in the arm and he takes off. He runs about 2 blocks to a fire station, which is pretty close to my house. They were further away, and the second victim ran closer. So the news reports are talking about this fire station where the second victim was finally able to get help. I guess he was running toward the fire station calling for help, and he wasn't able to get it until he got to the fire station. The police were on the scene. They apprehended the shooter near his home or something like that, and that was kind of the end of it. Then the news started coming in as I guess the guy was interrogated. The first victim was rushed to the hospital. I think he's was in stable condition. I would imagine he's out of the hospital now, and the other guy's dead. There's been some tributes and stuff like that in the paper, talking up the victim. Apparently he was really involved with the fire company. He did a lot of community work. He was well known in the area. I didn't know him. I'm not really too familiar with this area, but we've got a shooting that's happened literally walking distance from my house, which is kind of concerning. But call it selfish or call it whatever you want, insensitive, selfish, but this whole time that the story is developing, I'm really hoping that these two victims were pre-selected. I don't like the thought of just having some random gunman walking around the neighborhood. I'm hoping that if he's going to kill people, at least he's got them picked out, so that I guess it puts me in less danger if he's going around shooting random people. So again, call it selfish, call it insensitive, call it whatever you will. It's just self-preservation kicking in. So I'm relieved when I find out that it's not a random shooting. The guy's not walking around breaking off shots, and that's sort of where the story fades out. I haven't heard anything since, but the whole situation was kind of weird, and there really is no good guy in this whole story. There isn't a positive spin where some gun-toting guy saved the day, but it's one of those rare situations where there's a shooting really close to home and it's worth talking about just because it happened, not to glorify the shooter or anything like that. It's just one of those things where it can happen close to home. It's not just a situation where you read about it in the paper and it happened miles from here, or it happened in another part of the country. It happened somewhere that I've driven past hundreds of times, walked past dozens of times, if not hundreds of times. And, it's just a cold, hard reminder that shootings happen, and they can happen close to home. Always be prepared, and if you're going to leave the house and you've got a license or a permit to carry, do so, because things can break down anytime, anywhere, and this is just a cold, hard reminder of that. In this week's featured content portion of the podcast, I have two different articles I want to talk about. The first of which is entitled Liberty Reborn from Tom over at Fill Your Hands. The Liberty reference is the name of his gun. It's a Generation 3 Glock 19, which has been causing him some trouble over the years. The Glock 19s, the Gen 3 Glock 19 introduced finger grooves into the grip of the gun. And some people love it, some people hate it. It's kind of one of those things where you love it or you hate it. Either your fingers fit in there and the gun feels beautiful, or your fingers don't quite line up and the gun can get very uncomfortable after a couple of magazines. And Tom is talking about wanting to alleviate this problem. He can't shoot the gun for more than a couple magazines without his hand getting sore. He has tried installing a Hogue rubberized grip to sort of span those finger grooves, and while it helped, it didn't resolve the problem. So he talks about modifying the frame in such a way to get rid of those finger grooves. So he busts out the Dremel, he puts the gun in a vise, and he starts grinding away the polymer in between the finger grooves. So he's removing the raised portion of the grip where those finger grooves are cut out to sort of smooth it out a bit. And then he slips the Hogue grip back on, and it's perfect. He wishes he had modified the gun sooner. This is one of those things where it makes absolute perfect sense to get rid of the problem with the gun. You can remove the polymer. You're permanently modifying the frame. However, you're completely eliminating an issue that you have with the gun. When I purchased my Generation 4 Glock 19, I like the finger grooves. However, I think that they're raised too high. When I get a full firing grip on that gun and press out, my middle finger is situated in such a way where it's kind of, in order to get into the finger grooves, I'm holding the gun really high and my fingers sort of pinched between the finger groove and the trigger guard of the gun. And, just pressing out dry firing isn't a big deal, but when I go to live fire and the gun starts to recoil, I get a little bit of a grinding action on my finger. And it's not a big deal unless I'm putting a substantial number of rounds through my gun. When I shot an IDPA match a couple of weeks ago, I think I fired about 90 rounds, 90, 95, something like that. And by the end of the day, my finger felt kind of raw. I had a blister forming. It was just, not a very pleasant experience. And my finger was sore for a couple of days after that. I really didn't want to do any dry fire with the gun because I was still kind of sore, and pressing my hand up against the trigger guard like that, it was just making it worse. It wasn't allowing my finger to go back to normal. So I was giving a lot of consideration to relieving the trigger guard a little bit. I was looking into this. Some guys call it Glock knuckle. All of the more compact, smaller frame Glocks tend to have the finger grooves a little tighter together. There isn't a whole lot of real estate like in my Glock 17 where, my hand fits in there with plenty of room to spare. There's no binding or pressure against the trigger guard. So I was looking at it, and there are some guys that are using like a 1/2-inch dowel, a 5/8 dowel, wrapping it in sandpaper, and then putting a small radius cut into the trigger guard to sort of relieve some of that room, or relieve some of the trigger guard to make room for your middle finger. And I'm really considering doing the same thing. But like a commenter said on Tom's post, I'm really, really, really reluctant to modify something permanently like that. It's one of those things where I'm so afraid of going too far or it not working. I've permanently modified the gun, and now I've defaced the gun as well. So if it doesn't work out for me and I ever have to get rid of it, now what? Sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, I've attacked my Glock 19 with sandpaper, and that's why there's this big sort of moon-shaped cutout in the bottom of the trigger guard. So I'm really hesitant to go forward with it, but I really think it would resolve my issue with the gun my fingers being too crowded underneath the trigger guard. But this is a great example of someone had a problem with their Glock, that broke out the Dremel and completely eliminated that problem. So it's kind of reassuring because I'm on the fence. I don't know whether I want to do something with the frame of my gun, but at the same time, if I don't, it's going to be painful shooting it forward. So I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning towards getting out the Glock, or getting out the Dremel and modifying the Glock slightly. If I do, I'll tell you all about it. But head over to Fill Your Hands and check out Liberty Reborn, a post on permanently modifying a Glock 19. The second piece of featured content comes from Fem Rookie's Guns and Runs. It's a blog that I recently added to my RSS reader, and I came across this blog from a pingback on my Shoot Your Guide to Shooting a Competition contest. Someone else linked to it after, or I don't remember whether it was before or after they made their own contest entry, but I saw the pingback, and anytime I see a pingback that's not spam, I try to click back through and read what's being linked to me, and then if it's cool, I'll add it to my RSS reader and check it out later. And in this case, I did just that. I clicked through, I liked what I read some other posts, all of which I thought were good, so I grabbed the RSS feed and I put it into my reader. So during a slow time, I was kind of bored just browsing through some of the feeds that I have, and I started going back through the older posts on this particular blog. And I came across one entitled Great Week. It's just kind of a synopsis of some events that took place during a week, and I thought it was pretty cool. It's really quick and easy, but one of the things that really caught my eye was the USPSA reference. I don't remember the blog author's first name, and I always find it weird using someone's handle. So in this case, Fem Rookie is talking about getting her Glock 34 that she's using for USPSA upgraded with fiber optic sights. So she's talking a little bit about the green fiber optic sight on the gun, having received ComTac gear for USPSA shooting, holster, magazine pouches. She talks about a double belt. She doesn't mention the brand. It's either like CNR Speed or something else, but it's basically an inner and outer belt system. You put on this Velcro belt, and then when you get to the range, you put on top of that belt another belt, which is connected by Velcro, and it keeps all your gear in the exact same spot. It doesn't move around, and it just makes it easier to pull everything off at the range by peeling off this Velcro belt. It's a cool system. I don't have it. It's one of those things where I kind of would like to get one for myself, but it's not in my immediate future. I've got other things that I want to purchase first. But she talks about that. She talks about shooting an EAA Witness limited 9mm that she really liked. And then she goes on to talk about a little bit more USPSA stuff, being that she fired her 1,000th round through her Glock 34, which she affectionately calls G-Spot, and it's funny that she calls it that, and then makes a reference later, and I quote, "Look out, cardboard, I'm going to put G-Spot on your 10 ring." I thought that was funny. But, she talks about shooting 1,000 rounds through the Glock 34. She's officially unclassified. She got her information packet from USPSA, and it's just a really cool post. It's quick and easy, and I'm really looking forward to more USPSA posts. I love seeing them. I just don't think there are enough of them out there. So whenever I see something referencing USPSA, I get really excited because I like reading stage breakdowns. I like reading about matches all over the country. Video is fantastic. I love just USPSA, and seeing this kind of got me excited for things to come, or potential things to come. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out on this blog. One of the things about USPSA, especially this time of year, at least in my area, things start slowing down now. You're going to see fewer and fewer matches. Late October and November, you're probably going to see a lot of classifier matches pop up. There generally isn't any matches in this area in December, so theoretically, at least in my part of the country, you're looking at the rest of September, most of October, and maybe the first week or two of November before USPSA matches stop. And as the season ramps down, the clubs that hold USPSA matches in the area tend to do classifier matches to get people those 4 classifier stages that they need before the end of the season so that they can become classified for next season. So FemRookie, if you're out there, keep an eye out for classifier matches, because they will get you all of the classifier stages you need in a single match. For instance, some of the clubs around here will run 7 stages, 4 of which are probably going to be USPSA classifier stages. The other 3 will just be random either field stages or speed shoots, something to break up the monotony of classifier stages back to back to back to back to back. Some of the clubs that run 5 or 6 stages will probably run 4 classifiers and a couple of others mixed in. So if you're looking to get classified before the season is over, you've kind of got into it at the right time. There should be classifier matches popping up any time now. So head over to FemRookie's Guns and Runs and check out Great Week. It will be in the show notes. You can click through, and then after you're finished reading that, check out some of the other stuff she has on her blog. It is time for one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and that is the cigar and drink pairing. I'm running really low on time for the podcast. I'm actually going to have to do some cutting, get rid of a segment, just to make time, and I want to breeze through this really quickly. So the coffee that I'm drinking, it's the cigar and drink pairing, but 9 times out of 10 it's coffee. The coffee in this case is Green Mountain something. I don't remember which Green Mountain coffee it is. However, I'm enjoying it quite a bit. We ran out of the usual Dunkin' Donuts donut shop rotation that we're on, and my wife picked up some Green Mountain coffee from the grocery store that was on sale. She brought back the K-Cups, and I was a little concerned when she brought them back. In the past, we've done Green Mountain before, and I've always found it to taste a little dirty. I'm not real crazy about the brand. I don't know whether it's like the Arabica or something that they use in it, but it has that same sort of dirty aftertaste that I get out of something like Folgers or Maxwell House. So it's got that sort of bitterness to it that doesn't taste like good, okay, there's good bitterness and there's bad bitterness. For instance, bad bitterness is what I get out of like grocery store coffee kind of stuff. For instance, Maxwell House, Folgers, Crystals, they all have this dirty sort of bitterness to them. Good bitterness is the type of bitterness you get from a good solid stout or a porter. I like that sort of bitterness. I don't like the coffee kind of bitterness. But in this case, there's a little bit of bitterness, but I like it. It's on the good side of the bitterness table, and I'm pretty happy with the coffee. I'll have to look up what it is. I'll go grab a K-Cup. I'll include it in the show notes. But for lack of time, I don't have time to run up and grab a K-Cup to tell you what it is. So keep an eye out on the show notes for that. The cigar is the CAO Concert, and it's a new product from this year's IPCPR trade show in Orlando, which I covered at the beginning of the month. I don't know a whole lot about the cigar. Actually, I know very, very little, despite having been there and talked to the guys from CAO about it. I'm drawing a blank on the makeup of the cigar and things like that. So I'll include a link in the show notes so that you can check out the video that we did with the guys from CAO to learn more about the product. It's fairly new. You should be seeing a lot of promotional material for this brand coming out. CAO is now owned by General Cigar. It's become part of the General Cigar portfolio, for better or for worse, however you want to look at it. And it's a good, solid cigar. It's still fairly early in the morning. In terms of the podcast recording, it's late, but it's still fairly early in the morning. It's not overwhelming. It's a good medium-bodied cigar, and I'd say it's like right in the middle. It's medium. It's not mild to medium. It's not medium to full. It's just sort of middle of the road, medium-bodied. It's got good, solid flavor. It's easy on the palate, and it's something that I could smoke anytime throughout the day. It's not going to be overwhelming in the morning. It's not going to be too mild in the evening. It's just something that I can pick up anytime and enjoy. I'm not quite sure what the price point is. Again, you'll have to refer to the Stogie review video that we did at IPCPR earlier this month. So that is going to be the cigar and drink pairing of the podcast, and I really need to get moving if I want to finish this thing up one time. Well, initially I was going to cut the discussion portion of the podcast so that I could finish things out with the Ask the Audience segment. I have a couple of things that I need to read. I need to introduce the new discussion topic, and it dawned on me. I recorded some stuff in the car on the way to Cabela's. I'll just take the discussion portion that I recorded in the car and apply it to this podcast. Hopefully you'll be able to see most of it, but I just found a useful purpose for that footage. So right now, check out the discussion portion from that On the Road podcast, that half-cast, if you will, and I will be back to do the Ask the Audience segment. So as I said earlier, I really don't have much of a format in terms of this particular show, but I am on my way to Cabela's. I don't know whether I mentioned that or not. I think I re-recorded the intro like 2 or 3 times just because I wasn't quite sure where I was going with it. And at this point, I don't remember what I said in whichever intro I'm going to use. So I'm on my way to Cabela's for one of their safari vests for IDPA use. Initially, I was going to go with an Armadillo concealment vest, which looks like a very high quality vest, and they're a company out of Texas that does custom vests. So you measure yourself, you send in your sizes, and they will tailor a vest to you specifically. While they do it, they include embroidery for your name on one of the breastplates, and then you can have the back customized with different things. I think they put your last name right below your neck, right below your collar line on your back, and you also have the option of doing other custom logos and stuff on it. And one of the reasons I was looking at Armadillo Concealment was because I need a vest that I can do custom stuff to. I've got a sponsor for an upcoming IDPA match, the sanction match actually, the Liberty match of Valley Forge, or at Valley Forge. It's being held at Lower Providence Rod and Gun Club, and I needed something where I can have the Stogie Review logo pop on it, because they're sponsoring the event, or sponsoring me to shoot the event. So I was kind of looking through them. They're a little bit pricey. I think the vests are about $70. You know, as is. You know, when you start customizing them, they get more expensive. I was looking at having 2 logos put on the back. Digitizing for 2 logos was going to run between $30 and $50 per vest, or I'm sorry, per logo. So, you know, $70 plus another potential $100. You know, by the time you get shipping included in there, you know, you're pushing $200 for a custom vest, and I just kind of didn't want to go that route. It was too expensive. So instead, I'm heading up to Cabela's to look at one of their safari vests. It's a bit heavier than I want. It looks like it has a couple of bulky pockets across the front. I'm not real crazy about the way it looks, but I want to go check it out. If it's not too heavy, I'm going to pick it up. Hopefully it's a little on the lighter side. I don't really mind the additional pockets as long as they're not bulky and hanging off and causing issues with getting in the way. I hear that a lot of people use them for IDPA, so I want to get up and check it out. I could have ordered it online and probably saved a little money with some Cabela's voucher that showed up in the mail for online orders, but I wanted to actually see the vest, touch the vest, try it on, and see how it felt. So that is the purpose for this whole road trip. I'm on my way to Cabela's, just like I was the last time I did one of these half casts. Well, I just left Cabela's. I don't know if you're going to be able to see me or not. It's getting kind of dark outside, losing light inside the vehicle. But, you know, I thought I'd try to come back relatively quickly, go over kind of my Cabela's experience. Then, you know, do a really down and dirty quick cigar pairing, and then kind of close it out and let you be on your way. So, how did I make out in Cabela's? Well, I went inside. I went right to the men's apparel section, and I spent probably 20 minutes looking at a variety of different vests, all of which were very comfortable, except every single one of them were too short. You know, the issue with IDPA and concealment garment is that it has to conceal the gun. It's even the muzzle. That's, you know, if you're carrying outside the waistband and you have a holster that's relatively long or anything like that, the vest has got to cover it up. And the case with all of the vests that I was looking at, they were all too short, and they would have caused an issue with my outside the waistband Phobos holster. Now I could have solved the problem and gone inside the waistband with my Concealment Solutions holster. That was the whole purpose in buying that. But I want to shoot IDPA for a little bit with a standard outside the waistband, you know, molded plastic holster before I go with inside the waistband. And while all of these vests were comfortable and very nice, all of them were too short. So I wound up grabbing my phone. I did a quick search on the Cabela's website for the Cabela's Safari vest, and I took it to one of the Cabela's employees and I said, "Excuse me, where can I find this vest?" And I showed her the picture on my phone. She took me around. It was kind of off the beaten path, not exactly where I was looking, but she was able to find me the vest. And then when there was only one on the hanger, she was able to find a couple more. I got one in my size. The Safari vest is a little bit longer. It's actually lighter weight than it looks in the picture. It's a light vest. It's got lots of venting. So it should be relatively comfortable even in the winter months. So I picked one up. I don't know, $60, something like that. $60, $65 for the vest. No, $55 after tax and rounding up for wildlife conservation. So it cost me a grand total of $55. So I'm kind of happy with it. I have to use it and play around with it and see, you know, how exactly it feels with a gun. I didn't have actually I should have brought a holster along with me so that I could have worn the holster and checked out each vest. But just sort of knowing where the holster stops, I knew that all the other vests were going to be too short. So that is the grand finale for my Cabela's trip.
Two weeks ago, I introduced a new portion of the podcast in which I'm calling it Ask the Audience. And basically, I'm throwing a discussion topic out there for you to talk about. You know,
I tell you a story or I point something out to you, you respond, we get some interaction going, and hopefully it makes the podcast viewership swell a little bit. So last episode I talked about a situation where a father was teaching his children how to use firearms and carry firearms, and a 9-year-old was permitted to carry around a holstered gun, a hot holstered gun, under the supervision of their parents. And I just kind of threw that out there for discussion. And there were a couple of really good responses. I got no voice responses, which was kind of disappointing, especially since there was a second week in there where there was, where everything was going on and I wasn't able to get another podcast put together. But I was kind of hoping to get an audio submission or two, which didn't happen. But I did get a number of text responses, which I thought was great. The first one came from Ahot on YouTube. I don't know whether I just butchered your name or not, but the response was, my 2 boys have both started shooting BB guns at 2 years old and 22 at 3 years old. My 6-year-old received his first 22 single-shot rifle for Christmas when he was about 5.5. They both hunt with me or my dad or grandpa, but they will be able to deer hunt by themselves when they are old enough to hold a gun up and make an accurate shot. I think around 10 to 12 years old, even at 3 years old, they know how to handle a gun safely as they have been taught about guns their whole lives. No age is too young. The second response I have is from Gary via email. And he goes on to say, hi, Walt. First, their situation is much different than urban environments. So long as the kids are responsible at whatever age, then I don't see a problem with the caveat below. I think age is arbitrary. I know some kids that are definitely mature enough, and I know some adults that are not. The parts I disagree with are the starting age at 5 and then giving them a 9mm at age 9. If at 5 and 9 he feels they are mature and responsible enough, then fine. However, if they have not yet matured enough, then I would definitely delay when they earn that privilege. With the first child, I'm assuming this was the case. For the second and third child, I think their age hurdles should not necessarily be the same as the first child, but tailored to their individual development. So, really interesting responses, a little bit different perspective from one to the other, but good, solid responses. There were a couple of more. As I said back in the first episode, I don't want to read everything. I just want to kind of throw a couple out there as food for thought. So that's going to conclude the responses from last episode's Ask the Audience. For this week, I want to talk about something that I did recently on my Facebook page for Walt NPA. In order to garner some more likes and just get some discussion flowing, I decided to do the same thing on my Facebook page, just kind of throw something out there and let it develop. So one of the things that I threw out there got a couple of responses, and I thought I would do the same. I would apply that same question to the podcast and see if the answers are different than they were the first go around. So here's the situation. Let's just say that you have a shotgun and you've decided that you no longer need the shotgun, you would like to sell it, fund another project, you just need the money, you just want to clean out the safe. Whatever the case may be, you have a shotgun that you want to sell. And for argument's sake, we're going to say that in your state, you're permitted to sell long guns without going through a federally licensed dealer. You don't have to go through an FFL dealer to sell this long gun, which is the case in most states, but there are some exceptions. So you decide you're going to sell this gun, and you go through whatever means you feel necessary. You post it in the classified section of your favorite firearms forum. You just sort of spread the word around the neighborhood, talking to friends and things like that. Maybe you post an item for sale online somewhere else. But whatever the case is, you've decided that you want to sell the gun privately because your local gun shop isn't going to give you enough for it. So you get the word out. There's a buyer interested in purchasing the firearm. There's a buyer interested in purchasing the shotgun from you. You don't necessarily know this person really well. Maybe it's a friend of a friend of a friend. Whatever the case may be, you're not really familiar with the buyer. What do you do when selling that firearm or selling that shotgun? Do you just take cash and a handshake and call it a deal? Do you require a bill of sale and signatures? Do you insist that the buyer go through an FFL regardless, just so that there's a paper trail and now it's becoming the FFL's problem if something arises?
Are you taking copies of photo IDs, that sort of thing? You know, what are you doing? What steps are you going through to sell this firearm? What are you doing to protect yourself, if anything, in the event that this gun finds itself in the wrong hands? That sort of thing. So, really quickly again, you're selling a shotgun, you don't necessarily know the buyer very well, and now it's time to trade cash for the gun. What do you require of the buyer? It is time to close out the podcast, but before I do, I'm going to thank you for checking out episode 53 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. If you're an iTunes user, I would really appreciate any iTunes review that you wouldn't mind putting together and submitting. Comments are always welcome. If you head over to the show notes page, you can comment on the blog post, and I will do my best to get back to you. I'm trying to get better with the whole YouTube thing, so if you're a YouTube user, please feel free to leave a comment, video comment, that sort of thing, and I will do my best to get back to you in the event that there's a question. If you have a question or a comment that you want to make privately, you can please feel free to do so via email. The easiest way is to head over to waltinpa.com, click on the contact button, and a form will pop up. Actually, a form and some additional information will pop up. You can fill out the form and click submit. It will fire off an email. The additional information is my Twitter, Facebook, and Google Plus information if you'd rather use those means of contact to get in touch with me. If you prefer to just send me an email all by itself, you can do so by sending me an email at waltinpa.com, and that'll pretty much do it. If you're interested in doing an audio response to the Ask the Audience segment, or if you'd like to just send me an audio response in general, you can, on the show notes, there's a link in the Ask the Audience segment that will take you to a service called SpeakerPipe. It's free. Click the link, a page will load, and you'll see a record button. Click the record button, your microphone for your computer will turn on, it will record you talking. When you're finished, you click send, and it sends me the audio message. No additional software required, just open up your browser and have at it. And again, I'll do my best to get back with you, or however that works out. But again, thank you for checking out episode 53 of Shooting the Breeze. Stay safe, happy shooting, and I will catch you next time.
You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.